My professors always encourage me to tell a story with my research. Sometimes in science, this is hard to do. We're told to use adjectives carefully and to avoid subjective analogies. Today, I have the chance to bring my research to life by exploring it in a way I don't usually have the chance to. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matthew, and I study childhood brain cancer at McGill University. Unfortunately, a diagnosis with this type of cancer is likely a death sentence. Despite billions of dollars in funding and decades of research, minimal progress has been made in treating this disease. The usual cancer treatments, such as chemotherapy, offer little to no survival benefit while causing substantial damage to healthy cells. This is why we're working hard to better understand the disease and to find ways to treat it without damaging these healthy cells. While little progress has been made in treating the disease, our fundamental understanding of it is increasing rapidly, thanks to technologies that allow us to look more deeply into the heart of the disease. Today, I want to use some analogies to convey the complexity of the disease and to put us on the same page for how we're trying to treat it. First, when thinking of curing cancer, I find the word cancer a bit misleading. Using one word to describe something so complex leads to a misconception that there's one solution for this problem. Recently, I was listening to a podcast where a world-renowned physicist was giving his predictions for the future. He said that by the year 2050, he thinks we'll have a single cure for cancer. Now, for someone who doesn't make a living staring at tumor cells under a microscope, I totally understand this type of thinking. But for the relationship between the scientists and the public, treating cancer as one entity with one solution is not helpful. Here's where I think analogies can be of use, as words can provide a lens and make the microscopic visible to everyone. In the 17th century, a scientist named Robert Hooke looked at cork under a microscope and made perhaps the most famous analogy in biology. He noticed that the small, repetitive structures looked a lot like the rooms that monks lived in, and so he called them cells. Probably the most fundamental theory in all of biology, that living things are made up of cells, was established with one simple analogy. So, we have trillions of cells in our body, and these make up our muscles, nerves, bones, etc. Different types of tissues contain different types of cells, and anywhere where cells are, cancer can happen. Cancer can happen inside the brain or inside the blood, but you'd pack your belongings differently if you were to go hiking in a rainforest or rafting down a river. Cancer is nature too, a biological kind with immense natural variation. Even within brain cancer, no two tumors will ever be the same. I think it's helpful to keep in mind the tremendous diversity within us because it highlights why cancer will never be a one-solution problem. But another important key to this story is that we did not start off this complex. We start off very simple as one cell. Since I study brain tumors, I want to tell you about brain development and what happens in brain cancer. The human brain takes the longest to develop out of any species, around 25 years. At maturity, the cells in your brain should actually stop dividing, and the last stage of development involves pruning away connections that aren't being used, making the ones that are more efficient. So when I was thinking about brain development, it reminded me of the way we give responsibilities to people and how those responsibilities change as we mature. In childhood and adolescence, we don't have much responsibility. And at least speaking for myself, we're not thinking too much about what's going to happen in the future. In a landmark event, we graduate high school and then choose a program that dictates what we learn and do. Eventually, we become highly specialized members of society with unique responsibilities. Bursts of brain development happen to tightly align with each of these life milestones. And what happens inside the brain at each of these stages follows a remarkably similar pattern to what happens to us as we mature. An early brain contains cells called neural stem cells, which are good at giving rise to other cells, but don't have senior biological responsibilities themselves. As the brain matures, these cells create cells with more specialized functions, such as neurons, that can communicate with other cells. At maturity, neurons have refined their communication to reflect the unique experiences of your life. Now, I mentioned earlier that at maturity, the cells in your brain should stop dividing. In brain cancers that affect children, a mutation happens in the DNA of a brain cell, causing it to be stuck dividing and unable to reach maturity. DNA is the instruction manual that directs development from 1 to trillions of cells. A mutation in the DNA can change its meaning. In cancer, cells are told to endlessly divide, which then harms the surrounding tissue. What a healthy brain and functioning society have in common is the successful and well-timed cooperation of its component parts. This idea can be expressed by a quote that I like that goes, "Growth for the sake of growth is the ideology of the cancer cell." And what's particularly interesting about this quote is that it was made by an environmentalist who wanted to express the danger of an uncontrolled system. The fact that such strong analogies can be made between cells and the environment is fascinating to me. And I think it's due to the fact that nature repeats itself on multiple different levels. Nature repeats its most important messages, hoping that we listen. Here, it's telling us growth for the sake of growth is destructive. When this happens in cells, we call it cancer. When this happens to the Earth, we call it climate change. These problems aren't reversed by blind destruction. The solution requires a nuanced approach that applies our knowledge of the natural world, a process we call science. Back in the lab, we're using the same logic to fight brain cancer. We've read the DNA, and we've identified which mutations turn part of the brain into cancer. Now that we've decoded these signals, I'm using a tool called CRISPR to then edit the DNA to try and change the message that these cancer cells are receiving. In our experiments so far, we've shown this method to be effective at slowing tumor cell growth. Today, I hope I've told a story that encapsulates that we are biologically complex. Our complexity underlies why no one solution for cancer will ever exist. Our brains develop in a meticulously organized manner, yet one mutation in the DNA can alter this trajectory and lead to cancer. Blind growth creates problems, and the most difficult problems require nuanced solutions. With a grip on the nuance of brain cancer, I'm confident we're on the right track towards overcoming this disease for good. Thank you.